Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
I'm Kim Flottam.
And I'm Kirsten Traynor.
Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hive's protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Hey, thanks, Sherry. We also want to thank Bee Culture Magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this podcast. Bee Culture has been the magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today, and while you're there, check out Bee Culture's Beekeeping Your First 3 Years, a quarterly magazine for beginning beekeepers. We also want to thank 2 Million Blossoms as sponsor of this episode. 2 Million Blossoms is a quarterly magazine dedicated to protecting all pollinator insects, both wild and managed, before they disappear. Learn more on our Season 2, Episode 9 podcast with editor and our guest co-host, Kirsten Traynor, and from visiting www.2millionblossoms.com, and that is with a number 2. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us. We have a great show lined up today with our guest co-host, Kirsten. Hey, Kirsten, who are you talking with today?
Yes, I had a chance to sit down with Adam Ingrao from To Hives, a program that is based out of Michigan State and is now moving nationwide that gets veterans involved in beekeeping. And he and I had a lovely discussion about the benefits of working a hive for especially post-traumatic stress disorder.
You know, Kirsten, when I was with Bee Culture Magazine, we did a lot of work with veterans groups and making donations and helping where we could. I look forward to talking. This is one program I'm not familiar with, so it'll be good to listen in.
It'll be good. I'm looking forward to hearing what Adam has to say and the rest of the interview. So how's Berlin, Kirsten? Are you seeing any bees over there?
Oh my God, they do have bees. It is absolutely loaded with bees. For a city, it is one of the greenest cities I've ever been in, and it has more parks and free spaces, and a lot of those are planted with meadows. And so there's actually a meadow only 10 minutes away from where I live. I walk there on a pretty regular basis just to see all the bumblebees and solitary bees that show up. And of course, the honeybees are foraging right along there with them.
Is urban beekeeping a big thing there? Rooftop beekeeping?
It is. Urban beekeeping has become quite huge in the city. There's a lot of different philosophies, as there are in the United States, from highly managed colonies for honey production. Commercial beekeepers will also migrate into the city for the basswood, the linden bloom. And so Berlin is quite famous for its linden or lime honey.
Nice. Kim, have you been to Berlin?
Nope. One of the many places I've missed. Kirsten, how organized are these urban beekeepers? Is there a lot of associations? Is there an overall association?
There is an overall association in Germany called the Deutscher Imkerbund. There are a lot of the natural native beekeepers who do not belong to this, who very much are more on the top bar hive, treatment-free side of beekeeping. I haven't yet been to any beekeeping meetings in Berlin. I'm hoping to, but they haven't been meeting because of the whole pandemic. So it's been a little harder to interact with beekeepers than I normally would.
Well, I'd be interested to see how they set this up, and I'm not at all surprised that there's 2 different kinds of groups out there, just like there is everywhere else.
So, yes, and so Urban Beekeeping Day is actually coming up on July 19th, and we're going to be 2 Million Blossoms is putting out a video on all the bees in Berlin, so stay tuned for that.
That'll be fun. All right, let's get on with your interview with Adam Ingrao and To Hives.
Welcome to Beekeeping Today, a podcast on all things pertaining to bees. I'm guest host Kirsten Traynor, editor of 2 Million Blossoms, Protecting Our Pollinators. Today, I've invited Adam Ingrao, a U.S. military veteran, to chat with me about the program he helped launch, To Hives. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kirsten. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. So, Adam, I understand you were in the military. Can you tell our listeners a bit about reintegrating into society and some of the struggles vets face?
Yeah, I'm an Army veteran. I'm also a service-connected disabled Army veteran. And so I think that's probably, one of the main areas where veterans struggle with is a tremendous amount of wounds, both seen and unseen. And we transition from the military, those wounds present their own challenges, particularly around post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, which about 30% of our post 9/11 vets suffer from. So there's that angle of it, and then there's also the angle of just coming back to civilian society, which is very different from military society. When we're in the military, we're subject to a completely different set of laws. There's a culture all to its own in the military. And many of us, especially those who serve for many, many years, that becomes a culture that's ingrained. And so when you leave the military, one of the things that I experienced when I got out was I went from having this family of individuals that I was serving with in uniform that, had my back in anything, and when you get out of the military, especially for active duty folks that are serving in states that they don't live in, that they're not originally from. I was serving in Texas, and when I got discharged, I was shipped right back to California, and all of my friends were going to Afghanistan and Iraq. And so as I was transitioning, one of the things that I struggled with was going through this whole phase of trying to grapple with coming back to the civilian world, leaving a culture that you knew and you could rely on, and being exposed back to a culture where it sounds like having the freedom to do whatever you want is a great thing, but when you're told what to do all the time and you've always got a mission and always got direction, and all of a sudden the whole world is open to you, that can be overwhelming in itself. So when I was transitioning, and with a lot of the veterans that we work with, it really is that transition period can be a period that there can be a lot of success that can happen or a lot of failure. And for post 9/11 vets like myself, one of the big things that I struggled with was, going to the VA for treatment. And I got out in 2004, and that was kind of the age of opioids were being just handed out for everything. And I was one of those individuals that, was being basically given a steady diet of opioids from the VA for my condition. And that also presents its own challenges, because substance abuse is something that a lot of veterans deal with to deal with their wounds, again, both seen and unseen. So that's some of the challenges that we face. And one of the big things I think also that stuck with me is that, when I was in the military, I was serving a mission that was larger than myself. I was there to serve, to protect the security of our nation. And when you get out, that mission is gone. There's still a desire to serve for a lot of our veterans, even though I may not be physically able to serve anymore. I still wanted to serve my nation, and not having that ability when you get out, or at least there not being the direction to help you continue to serve in that way, that was also a really, really big struggle for me.
And I would imagine, you're being dropped then into a new area. You don't have that same family or friend structure. You're at a time point in life where your experiences differ from a lot of the people around you, that it's probably very difficult to even start making a new network. So how did you first get involved in bees? Was this sort of grasping for attachment to something or something to do, or what brought you to the bees?
It really, I don't know. It was all just the perfect, like it was the universe was just lining things up for me. So I got out, I struggled for a couple of years. I met my wife about a year and a half after I got out. And that's when things really started to change for me, when I had someone that was also being an advocate for me as well, and helping me kind of see the things that were going on in my life that maybe were not as positive as they could be during that transitional period. And so basically the way I got involved with bees is that I decided to go back to school. I had my GI Bill. My wife and I decided that it'd be a good idea for me to go back to school, get a degree. And that's really where it all started. I took my GI Bill, went back to school, went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and was studying plant science, actually. And I started getting into plant protection science, dealing with more entomological side of plant production. And during that time, you've got all of these free electives that you can take. And I took a beekeeping course my first semester there. And that first time in the bee yard, I don't really consider myself very spiritual, but I can definitely say that first time of being in a bee yard, it was probably the most spiritual experience I'd ever had. Not only was I experiencing something where, with bees, you've got to be so focused. If you're not, if you're thinking about other things, if you're not being mindful, if you're not being present, the bees are going to let you know, and they let you know by stinging you. And so for me, that was a reinforcement of, trying to practice mindfulness and being present. It had since I had been in the military. And that's one of the things I think veterans like about beekeeping is that we respond positively to physical reinforcement. If it was in the military, we were doing push-ups if we did something wrong. With beekeeping, if we're, mishandling bees, if we're smashing bees, if we're moving too fast, the bees let us know. And it's kind of like positive reinforcement in the way that we're used to. And so for me, that really spoke to me. But I think one of the big things when I first got involved that made a big difference for me is that I had a professor, Scott Jeffries, out in, he used to teach at Cal Poly. And he really communicated the value of bees to agriculture and the value of bees to ecosystems and just to our nation's food supply in general. And that's what really spoke to me. So not only did I see this kind of healing aspect where I could kind of get out of my head while I was in the bee yard and really be focused on being present, but it was an opportunity to continue to serve by protecting the most important managed pollinator on the planet. And I saw that as an ability for me to continue serving my country by protecting our food security. And that really met up with that need to continue to serve. And so it kind of just, all those things meshed together. And from that, this whole just passion around honeybees and insects in general just really sprouted. It led to me going to graduate school, finishing my Ph.D. in entomology. It was really the driver for all of that movement forward in my life. So it was a life-changing experience that first time in the bee yard.
Yeah. I think for people who've never opened a hive, it's really difficult to try and explain what that feels like. I mean, there's definitely an element of danger. There's this curiosity. There's, like you say, everything has to be washed from the mind and you really have to focus on the task at hand. So congratulations on the PhD. I'm glad it all aligned. And you've now launched this very fascinating program called Heroes to Hives. Can you tell us a bit about that and how it came into existence?
Yeah, Heroes to Hives. So we're in our 5th year of Heroes to Hives, being a program. And the first year that we started that, it was really my wife and I coming together while I was doing my PhD. We had started a small urban farm in Lansing, just off of MSU's campus, and did a couple acres there. We had started a couple beehives out there. I was getting back into bees, moving from California to Michigan. We had, kind of stopped everything and restarted in Michigan. And we had a conversation one day while we were talking about kind of our vision for the farm. And my wife kind of really wanted to explore, her background is in transpersonal psychology and nature-based therapy. Okay. And so she saw this transformative experience of myself with bees. And she thought, we started talking about, could other veterans actually have this same experience?
Right.
And so the first year, I just put it out into some, group of friends within the community. And we had 5 veterans that basically followed me around for an entire year of beekeeping. We changed our, we would do PowerPoint lectures in our living room. We'd have like lab in my workshop, and then we would go out to the farm and work bees. And it was just kind of this like holistic experience of just being around bees together. Right. And, at first my thought was, okay, well, these are individuals that just want to learn about bees. But as we got through the season, what we started to discover was the conversations that were happening over those beehives stopped being about management, because everybody was starting to get on the same page, and started to be about things that happened in combat, things that happened in the military, experiences that we've had that maybe are, things that are tough to talk about.
Right.
And so we actually started having conversations about these things in the bee yard. And
fascinating.
Really the pinnacle, or I guess the whole peak of that was when we did a honey harvest at the end of the season. And one of the students' spouses came up to my wife and said, I don't know where he'd be without this program right now. And that really hit home for me. This was an individual that had seen a lot of combat and was struggling with some personal things. And that one comment made all the difference. And luckily, because I was at MSU during the time studying my PhD, I happened to have colleagues that were working in beekeeping, Megan Milbrath being the primary one of those. And again, things just kind of lined up. So I had done this beekeeping program for just about 6 months. And I had been in addition to doing all of this, I also do a lot of advocacy for veterans and legislation that helps veterans get into agriculture. So I was actually speaking at the Michigan House of Representatives, and I was doing a talk, and they'd asked me to talk about some of the things that I had going on around agriculture and veterans. And so one of the things I mentioned was Heroes to Hives during that. And it just so happens that the AT&T Foundation was in the audience, and they had reached out to me and said, "Hey, we love this program. We'd like to give you some seed money to get this really going. Way beyond 5 veterans."
Right.
And so I reached out to Megan, and she was running the Michigan Pollinator Initiative. And I said, "Megan, I've got this great opportunity to train veterans to be beekeepers. We've got some money for it. Could we bring this over to MSU?" And she helped us bring it over to MSU. And so for the last 4 years, we've been running that through MSU as a full program. It's been quite a ride since we've moved over to MSU. We are growing just leaps and bounds.
I would imagine so. I mean, it really is a grassroots initiative that really took off, and that's quite the fascinating combination that you had someone in the audience willing to put in that initial funding. And I mean, I've spoken to a veterans group myself about beekeeping, and I have to say those were some of the best questions that have ever been lobbied at me. They were fully in tune, paying attention, and just for never having opened a hive, they had really, really insightful questions. So, I mean, there is a certain element of danger to keeping stinging insects, and also the need to care for something outside of yourself. So why do you think beekeeping appeals to so many veterans?
That's a really great question. I think, obviously, like I talked about earlier, this opportunity to continue to serve. And that's one thing I talk a lot about within the program is that, this is an opportunity to ensure the food security of your nation by protecting this managed pollinator. So I know that that's one aspect of it. I know that, so other veterans that I have that are part of the program, we do evaluations every year. So I see a lot of testimonials that come through the program. So other things that really resonate with them as part of the program, individuals that have seen a lot of combat, there's this level of kind of adrenaline that they kind of need all the time to feel normal. So if you've spent a lot of time being in stressful situations like combat, that adrenaline just needs to be there. And so for some folks, we've gotten comments that it's like they get this kind of almost adrenaline fix of being around these venomous insects, and that kind of helps them with that. Others really speak about the mindfulness, and a lot of the individuals that we work with are really just there to beekeep as a hobby. And so many of them use it as their therapy. We've had many Vietnam vets in particular that have told me that they just like sitting out and watching bees coming in and out of the hive, that's kind of a meditative experience for them.
Right.
So there's this health aspect to it as well. But then we also have veterans that are interested in it as a business as well. So we kind of run all of these different reasons that veterans are into it. It's interesting though, because when I think about veterans and beekeeping overall, I always come back to E.F. Phillips in the early 1900s and working with World War I vets as they were transitioning back from military service to the United States. I mean, the USDA had a whole campaign about getting veterans to become beekeepers, and E.F. Phillips was really the individual that pioneered that. Yeah, it's a fascinating story. I really encourage you to check it out. When he was with the USDA, before he went to Cornell, he ran a program that was focused on basically transitioning military veterans to beekeepers as part of the war effort. Because the products like wax were being used for ropes, munitions, things like that. Yeah. So,
beeswax was super important.
That comes back to me. It was, and it still is, right? So that's something. So veterans have had an attraction to beekeeping kind of forever. So it's interesting. I can't tell you like the exact thing that brings veterans there. There's a lot of reasons, but I can say that just the response that we've had from the program that we're running, we're now the largest ag training program for veterans in the country, teaching beekeeping of all things. And so just as an ag endeavor, and that is another reason people like beekeeping, is because it's kind of an easy way to get into agriculture. There's upfront cost to it, but you don't necessarily have to have land. Yeah. You don't have to have lots of equipment, tractors and things like that. So it is kind of an entry into agriculture. And we have seen that a lot with veterans they're just interested in getting into agriculture as a field or as something to support their family so that they feel more independent. A whole bunch of reasons around that. Yeah.
Better Bee is pleased to present the interviews by Kirsten Traynor. As a supplier to our nation's beekeepers for over 40 years, Better Bee provides the tools, equipment, and information you need to succeed. Through its many beekeeping employees, Better Bee serves you with solutions to your beekeeping challenges. That's why they can say with confidence that they are your partners in better beekeeping. Thanks to Better Bee for their informative catalog, website, supportive beekeeper education, and for sponsoring the series featuring Kirsten. Be sure to see the latest at betterbee.com.
And so how many veterans have been through your program so far?
So to date, we've had 699 veterans go through the program, 227 dependents.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the last 5 years, and this year definitely is our biggest year. We have almost 500 students in the program this year.
Wow, that's phenomenal. That's a lot of heads to manage and responses. I'm sure that puts quite a bit of pressure on you as well.
A lot of questions and answers. Yes, indeed. We've tried to streamline the program over the years. I mean, we weren't always this big. And so over the years, we've definitely changed things a little bit, and we continue to evolve as an organization and as a program as we move, that we need a team of individuals to do that. And we are moving into that direction, in addition to having partners across the United States that are coming on as other Heroes to Hives programs. So we're working on that expansion, but yeah, it's been just an incredible response we've had from the veteran community.
Oh, I would imagine so. And so you mentioned that you're getting similar programs off the ground in other states. For some of our listeners who may want to get involved, can you suggest any resources or how they might approach a group about getting this going in their own state or involved with your organization?
Yeah, if they want to get involved with our organization, the main way to do that would be just to contact me personally. We have our website, heroestohives.com, where all of our information is at. And so that would be one way if you want to explore that opportunity. We do have some pretty specific criteria that we look for partners. So we are kind of wading into this at a very slow pace. Our first partner that is coming online next year is the University of Missouri.
Nice.
And so we're really looking for universities as partners, particularly extension portions of those universities, mainly because we want to make sure that there's accountability as far as curriculum development and what is being taught to our students. That is one of the things that we see so much, is just the power of YouTube with misinformation in beekeeping.
Yes.
And so anybody that we bring on board, we want to make sure is someone who is trained as a beekeeper, that has the academic background and educational background to support that. So we're looking for universities as partners right now. We have partnered with a few community organizations over the years, where basically they will provide on-ground programming as far as just hands-on experience, but they send their students to our program for the foundational online program. So 9 months of our curriculum is online, and our students get it's anywhere from 5 to 10 hours of curriculum a month. That's in kind of a self-paced, contained online format. So those partner organizations generally will send their students to get the online portion from us, and then they will do the on-ground portion in their own states. We're actually working with a group in Pennsylvania right now that's doing that.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And while you've been running this program, what has surprised you the most about either the individuals involved or the responses you have received?
Oh boy, the most surprising thing I think for me just is the level of interest from the veteran community. It's been, I never expected this program to get this large. I mean, it was really, when we started this was just more of just a way for us to give back to our community. I served in the military. I never served in combat. And this was, I always look at this as Heroes of Hives is an opportunity for me to give back to that community that sacrificed so much. I never thought it would be to this extent. So I think just the level of interest from veterans around beekeeping, and I know those of us who have been in the industry for any length of time, we've seen this kind of surge in interest in beekeeping over, I'd say, the last 15 years or something like that. It seems like everybody wants to be a beekeeper. And so I don't necessarily think it's unique within the veteran demographic. But what I will say, and I think you alluded, or you said it as well, the veterans are very engaged. I have core groups of veterans that are part of our program that are so engaged and so interested in not only protecting honeybees, but also protecting other things. I think that's one of the coolest, actually, you know what? That's probably the most surprising thing. One of the coolest things I think that comes out of this is that people come into this learning about bees, but I'll say that bees are they're like a gateway insect, right? It's like you get interested in bees, and then all of a sudden your mind opens up to so much more. And so now, as an example for our program this year, one of the things that we're working on is with a group here in Michigan that does surveys of insects. And so our students are actually doing bumblebee surveys this year. And so not only are they learning about honeybees, but they're doing bumblebee surveys, and they're excited about it, which is getting people excited about entomology is just amazing. And in my perspective as an entomologist, I think insects are the coolest thing that's around, and to see other people share that interest, and bees are the way that we're getting them to it. So not only do they become aware about the plight of honeybees and all the challenges that we face in the beekeeping industry, but they become much more acutely aware of all of these external stress factors that are coming in and affecting ecosystems and insects in general. And, we have people that will respond to and ask questions about things like, pesticide drift and things like that. Right. And these are things that people were not thinking about before they started thinking about bees. And so it's been amazing to see that kind of growth of interest just in conservation, insects in general, and just a real connection with nature. So reaching out to that natural world more and becoming more interactive with it, rather than being a dominant species in the landscape. Maybe our individuals learn a little bit more about participating in that overall system.
Right. No, I and you used my term as well. I always say that honeybees are the gateway bug, and it's sort of like the drug that gets you hooked on learning about ecosystems and all these other parts that fit into the puzzle. So I'm very happy to see that. The focus is not just for them on honeybees, but that pulls them into these bigger questions and pursuing sort of how all these interconnected pieces can really be aided through service. Is there anything else you would like to add that we haven't covered on your program?
Well, I will say this, that, one of the things about our program, it is completely free to veterans and their dependents. So if any veterans that are listening are interested in participating in the program, our registration period is from November 1st to the end of February every year. The program starts in March. And if you're interested, go to heroestohives.com to learn more.
Okay. And we will include a link to that in the show notes as well. Well, thank you so much, Adam, for taking a chunk out of your day to speak about bees. I know you're headed out to the bee yard right after this call, so I appreciate it, and good luck with the bees. I hope your summer is shaping up nicely.
Thank you, Kirsten. Best to yourself as well.
Thank you.
Oh, that was really, really fun, Kirsten, and Adam and his team are really doing some great work for the veterans.
They sure are. I'm so excited. I got to meet him when I visited Michigan State in March, right as the pandemic crisis was unfolding. And he has a lot of enthusiasm, and he's really gotten this program up and running. The number of people they're enrolling this year is incredible.
I was amazed at the number of people that he has enrolling. Something like 500, didn't he say like 500 people this year? And not only vets, but their families. And Correct. That I think is really good. That everybody gets to do it together. That was, he's done a really good job. And Megan Milbrath is part of this. It was good to hear that she's involved in it too. And an impressive operation. I hope it continues to grow.
Yes, I do too. I mean, these veterans programs are popping up all over the world. I know there's one in the UK as well, where they've worked with a lot of the returning soldiers from Afghanistan and getting them involved in beekeeping.
One of the things he said that struck out to me, because it's something I've often thought, is he says, opening a hive, you really have to clear your mind and make that the only thing you're thinking about. And that in itself is a type of therapy that is very useful for the veterans. And translating that from just the noise that's usually in my head just as a regular day thing, and taking that to how that can help returning veterans with PTSD was really useful. It was really fun to hear that being used that way.
Yeah, what I also found really interesting is that once they have an appreciation for honeybees, their perspective expands quite beyond that onto the whole ecosystem. And I coming from protecting all pollinators, that is a message that very much resonates with me.
Great.
I think the term you used, Kirsten, was a gateway insect.
That
was good.
I always call honeybees the gateway bug. They're like a drug.
All right. Well, that about wraps it up for this podcast. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. Even better, write a review and let us know what you like. As always, we thank Bee Culture, the magazine for American beekeeping, for their continued sponsorship of Beekeeping Today podcast. We want to thank our regular episode sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. We want to thank our sponsor for Kirsten's interview, Better Bee. Check them out at www.betterbee.com. And finally, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on this show. Feel free to send us questions and comments to questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else, Kim, Kirsten?
I think that about wraps it up, Jeff. Good job, Kirsten.
Yep.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Thanks.